We are counting down the top 10 boats built to let you sail alone, well past 60. From compact blue water hulls that steer themselves so you can pour coffee, to fortress-like cruisers where every winch, rudder, and rig is designed to respect aging joints, these are not weekend toys. These are the forever boats, the last boats you may ever need. Which designs truly let you leave the helm behind and keep sailing into your 80s? Here is what sets them apart, starting with number 10. The Vancouver 27 sits low and steady in the water, a heavy displacement pocket cruiser drawn by Robert B. Harris for sailors who trust physics over bravado. With a displacement near 9,000 pounds and a ballast ratio that hovers between 42 to 45%. This is the smallest hull here, but it is built to shrug off the sea. The full keel runs nearly the length of the boat, ending in a keel-hung rudder, a design that keeps her tracking straight when the wind pipes up or the waves come from behind. Owners talk about setting the sails, locking the wheel, and walking below for minutes at a time without a second thought. The Vancouver does not lurch or wander. She stiffens early, heels only a little, and keeps her decks dry. There is no rush, no drama, just a slow, inevitable march toward the horizon. You give up speed, but you gain a boat that forgives aging knees and tired hands. This is the baseline for true solo trackability, a 27-footer that acts like a lifeboat, not a toy. Thomas Gilmer's Southern Cross 31 stands out for one reason: the canoe stern. In a world of flat transoms, this double-ender was drawn to handle real ocean weather, not just marina gossip. When the wind swings aft and the seas start to build, the Southern Cross does not invite trouble. That fine tapered stern lets following waves split and roll around the hull rather than slamming straight into the cockpit. Owners who have ridden out gales in these boats talk about staying dry at the helm while other cruisers scoop up green water. It is not magic. Pooping can happen to any boat, but the odds and the violence drop when a hull is shaped to shed water, not catch it. Construction was conservative for the era. Most hulls were heavy fiberglass, with some built as solid glass and others with AirX foam core. The deck is always balsa cord, so survey matters, but the Southern Cross was never about shaving weight. At roughly 11,400 pounds displacement, with a full keel and the rudder trailing right at the stern, this is a boat that tracks steady off the wind and forgives a tired hand on the helm. It is not fast, and it does not win dockside arguments, but it keeps its crew dry and its course true when the weather turns mean. The Allied Seawind 2 stands out for one reason: the ketch rig. Instead of wrestling a single heavy mainsail, you split the effort across 3 smaller sails: main, mizzen, and headsail. That means the mainsail is both short and light, and most owners past 60 will tell you they can hoist it by hand, no winch required. This division of labor is not just theory. On a Seawind 2, the mainsail often weighs less than a large Genoa on a sloop the same size. The mizzen, set aft, helps balance the boat and can fine-tune the helm for self-steering. In moderate wind, you can reef or drop the main entirely and still keep moving with mizzen and headsail alone. The hull is hand-laid solid fiberglass, built in an era when no one was trying to save weight for the sake of speed. At just over 13,000 pounds displacement and 32 feet on deck, the interior volume feels closer to a 35-foot boat. This boat is designed for the skipper who wants to keep sailing solo as the years add up. Less muscle, more leverage. The trade-off is complexity, more spars, more lines, and a slightly slower tack. But for many, the ability to manage every sail without straining a shoulder is worth every extra shackle. Ted Brewer's take on the Morgan 382 and 384 was simple: build a 38-foot cruiser that moves softly, tracks straight, and does not break the bank. The result is a moderate displacement hull, about 17,000 pounds, with a beam just under 12 feet and a lead keel bolted on. But the real story is underneath. Instead of a twitchy spade rudder, Brewer drew a Skeg-Hung rudder tucked behind a partial keel for protection and stability. That skeg is not just insurance against a floating log. It is what lets this boat hold a course for hours, even when the seas are restless and the wind is up. Owners talk about long days at the wheel where the autopilot barely has to work, and hand steering does not leave you wrung out. The motion comfort numbers back it up. Comfort ratio near 30, displacement to length ratio around 270, right in the sweet spot for a solo sailor who wants to sleep, cook, or just relax between sail trims. The cockpit layout is classic 1970s, big enough to stretch out, tight enough to brace yourself, with primary winches close enough for a seated skipper to trim without leaving the helm. No acrobatics, no scrambling across the benches. On the used market, the Morgan 382 and 384 have a reputation as the best buy among real offshore hulls. A sound example trades in the mid-30s to mid-40s $1,000 range, and even a top-tier refit-ready boat rarely cracks $50,000. For a hull that tracks like a train and moves with the sea, not against it, that is a value hard to match. This is the entry point for solo sailors who want blue water comfort without a six-figure spend. The Niagara. 35 Encore was drawn by Ted Gozzard and built by Hinterholler Yachts, a yard known for high standards and honest glasswork. At first glance, it is a moderate 35-footer, 11.5 feet of beam, displacement around 14,000 pounds, and a proper lead keel bolted to the hull. What sets the Encore apart is not found on the deck plan. It is forward, where most boats squeeze in a V-berth for guests you rarely see. The Encore layout clears that space for a true workshop and sail locker. You get a bench, racks for tools, bins for spare parts, and room to hang wet gear. Everything a solo sailor needs to keep the boat running for decades, not just a season. This is a boat that knows where the time is actually spent, in the main salon, the cockpit, and when something breaks, up forward with your hands on the problem. Sleeping quarters move amidships where motion is gentler at sea. The rest is pure practicality, huge storage for lines, sails, and the gear that keeps you self-sufficient. Underneath, the lead keel, not iron, keeps the center of gravity low and resists corrosion, a detail that matters when you are planning for a lifetime afloat. The Skeg-Hung rudder supports easy tracking, but the real win here is livability. For the solo sailor who wants to stay out, fix what breaks, and never wait on a marina, the Niagara 35 Encore is a workshop with sails, a boat built for the long haul, not just the next passage. Ted Hood's Bristol 35.5 was built for sailors who want options, real options. With the centerboard down, the draft reaches 7 feet, giving you the bite and stability to claw upwind offshore. Pull the board up, and you are floating in less than 4 feet of water. That is the difference between anchoring with the crowd and slipping up a marsh creek, or tucking into a hurricane hole where only the birds can see you. Owners who cruise the Chesapeake or the Bahama banks keep logs full of hidden anchorages, spots where the chart says 3.5 feet, and the Bristol with the board up just slides in and settles onto the mud at low tide without fuss. The hull is solid fiberglass, and the ballast sits low in the stub keel, so you do not give up much in the way of stability. The centerboard itself is simple, just a cable and a pivot, easy to inspect and service if you keep up with it. Once you are underway, you set the board for the conditions and forget about it. The cockpit is classic Harrishoff, white panels, warm mahogany trim, and nothing flashy. The primary winches are within arm's reach of the wheel, so you can trim the jib or reef the main without ever leaving your seat. At 35.5 feet, with a displacement around 13,500 pounds, the Bristol is no lightweight, but she is not a brute either. What you get is tactical freedom, deep draft when you need it, shoal draft when you want it. For the solo sailor who values privacy, security, and the right to disappear when the weather turns, that is worth more than any extra knot of speed. The Pacific Sea Craft 34 stands as Bill Crelock's answer to the question, How soft can a boat move without asking too much from a solo sailor? At 34 feet overall, with a displacement just under 13,500 pounds and a Skeg-Hung rudder trailing a long fin keel, this hull was drawn to make the ocean feel smaller, not the sailor. The canoe's stern and fine bow slice through chop, but it is the way the boat absorbs motion, never jerking, never slamming. That earns it a reputation among delivery skippers and owners alike. On a 2-day offshore leg, fatigue comes not from fighting the boat, but from watching the horizon. One owner's log notes that he slept 4 hours at a stretch, woke up rested, and nothing had shifted. She just kept rolling along. Krelock's design philosophy was simple: comfort first, speed second. The 34 is smaller and lighter than his famous 37, and that size drop pays dividends for solo handling. Sheet loads are manageable, winches are within easy reach, and every control feels sized for real hands, not racing crews. The design's motion comfort is not just theory. IMU traces from owner passages show lower peak accelerations than many heavier boats, even when the wind pipes up. That means fewer bruises, less bracing, and nights at sea that do not punish aging joints. There is another reason this boat sits high on the list: value retention. Pacific Sea Craft's build quality and the Krelock name keep resale values strong year after year. Used examples often sell for more than their contemporaries, and a clean hull draws buyers from both coasts. The trade-off is interior volume. The 34 feels snug compared to the next 3 boats, but no other hull this size delivers such a gentle ride for a solo skipper. In the world of forever boats, motion comfort is an investment that pays out every mile. Rain hammers the deck, but the Gulf 32's helm stays dry. This is one of the few boats in its class where you can steer from inside, coffee in hand, while the weather does its worst outside. Designed at 32 feet overall and weighing in near 13,000 pounds, the Gulf is not a floating greenhouse or a sluggish motor sailor. It is a real cruiser with a raised pilot house that changes what is possible for a solo sailor past 60. The inside steering station is not just about comfort. For anyone with worn knees or stiff hips, it means you can sail in foul weather without bracing yourself against cold spray or hanging on for dear life. Owners in the Pacific Northwest and New England talk about adding 3 extra months to their season. Autumn squalls and spring gales become part of the routine, not reasons to haul out early. You step inside, shut the door, and keep going while everyone else is tied to the dock. The pilot house also brings the key controls within easy reach. Throttle, wheel, and most essential lines are close enough that you do not have to risk a bad step on a rolling deck. On a Gulf 32, you can tack, adjust course, or throttle up without letting go of a handhold or leaving the warmth of the cabin. That is not a luxury, it is a survival feature for the solo sailor with a few decades behind him. There is a trade-off. The pilot house adds some windage, so you will lose a touch of speed when the breeze pipes up. But in return, you get a boat that lets you sail longer, in more comfort, and with less pain. For the sailor who wants to keep going when the weather turns mean, the Gulf 32 is the difference between packing it in for the season and pushing on for one more passage. The Shannon 38 sits at the summit of overbuilt American cruising boats. Walter Schultz and his Rhode Island yard set out to build hulls that could take a pounding and shrug it off, not just once, but for decades. The numbers tell the story. The boat is almost 38 feet long, with a beam of nearly 12 feet and a displacement that pushes 21,000 pounds, more than some 45-footers. Laminates below the waterline are famously thick, with surveyors' ultrasound readings showing solid glass nearing an inch in places. This is not marketing puff. It is the result of hand-laid glasswork done to standards that ran well past Lloyd's minimums. Owners swapping stories in the yard would talk about hulls so tough that a hard grounding left only scratched bottom paint, where lighter boats would be calling the insurance company. Hardware is just as serious. Original Shannons came with bronze chain plates, cleats, winch bases, and even hose pipes, metal that shrugs off decades of salt and stress, not the stamped stainless you see on production cruisers. On deck, every fitting is oversized, every bolt is doubled. When you grab a handrail or lean on a stanchion, there is no flex, no give. This is a boat built to outlast its first owner, and maybe the next as well. For the solo sailor, the cutter rig is the secret weapon. Instead of wrestling a big overlapping Genoa, you work with a small Yankee and a staysail, both on furlers. Sheet loads stay low, and the winches do not demand more than a single hand. That means you can reef or tack without breaking a sweat, even when the wind is up and your shoulders are not what they used to be. The long keel and heavy displacement keep her tracking straight, and the autopilot barely has to work. There is a cost to all this. The Shannon 38 is heavy to move and expensive to maintain, and she will not sneak into skinny anchorages. But if you want a hull that shrugs off storms, keeps the deck gear intact, and lets you sail on your own terms long after your hair is white, this is the tank. Only one boat on this list is more forgiving, and that is what comes next. The Island Packet 380 stands apart with a full foil keel that runs the boat's entire length, molded as one with the hull. At 38.7 feet long, displacing about 22,800 pounds and carrying 10,000 pounds of ballast deep in its cavity, this is a boat built to hold its course. The draft is just 4 feet 7 inches, which allows for shallow anchorages. Underway, the keel and semi-balanced rudder keep the bow steady. The design answers a question every solo sailor faces. Can you trust the boat to track straight when you need to step away? Owners say yes. They talk about locking the wheel, setting the staysail, and heading below to make a sandwich. They return to find the compass has barely moved. The secret lies in the underwater geometry. The hull resists side forces, and the rudder hung on the trailing edge of the keel acts more like a barn door than a spade. The boat absorbs gusts and waves, moving with a slow, predictable rhythm. Even in a following sea, the stern stays planted, never threatening to round up or to skate. The motion is forgiving, letting you stand, stretch, and trust your legs after hours at the helm. Solo handling is where the 380 quietly excels. The cutter rig splits the headsail area, but it is the Hoyt self-tending boom on the staysail that changes everything. Tacking becomes a one-handed affair. Turn the wheel, and the staysail swings across on its own. No scrambling, no wrestling sheets. For sailors past 60, that is not just convenience, it is independence. The primary winches sit within easy reach, and all lines for daily sailing lead back to the cockpit. Below, the 13-foot beam and smart layout give the feel of a 45-footer. A real galley, a spacious salon, a head with room to move, and storage for months. Tankage is generous, comfort ratio above 30, and motion gentle enough to wake well rested. The Island Packet 380 is not fast, but for those who want to keep going, it is a fortress, steady, forgiving, and always on course. Across all 10 forever boats, one truth stands out. Solo sailing after 60 is about engineering that respects age, not fighting against it. These designs prove that physics, stable hulls, forgiving rigs, and protected cockpits matter more than brute strength. Independence on the water is not lost to time. It is safeguarded by smart choices. Which boat would you trust to bring you home? Tell me in the comments.